Well, hello. We'll try this again. Had some technical difficulties there. That was kind of fun. I was going through my story. So, since I'm recording this for posterity, I will start over, basically rewind the book. I'm also recording this, so if you were in the live stream when it had technical difficulties and I had to restart, then this will be recorded and you'll be just fine. Hopefully, watching it when it's made available. So anyway, so welcome to the Jacob Jewett IT Training and Consulting live stream. My name is Jacob Jewett. Previously, earlier tonight, I started this live stream, and unfortunately, in the middle of doing the live stream, had some issues with technical issues. It looked like the internet went down. I lost my connection with YouTube, and ended up restarting my modem, which then led to me having to restart OBS, which then led to me having to restart Stream Deck. And the start of this stream tonight, the second redo stream tonight, was done manually because my Stream Deck decided to take a dump. So I had a bunch of stuff happen all kind of at once. I've never had that issue before, so I guess I got some more kinks to work out. But the premise of tonight's live stream is I'm going to possibly have a guest on Sunday, Sunday's live stream. Hopefully I get all these kinks worked out by then. But I was talking to him earlier, and he stated that he liked my story and that I should share it. And I've been wanting to share my story. A lot of people who know me or know who I am have either experienced part of my story or they helped me in some way. So I just figured that this was kind of an ode to them. So I apologize that if you were on the last live stream, which was about a half an hour ago, when it started, you probably heard parts of this already. So again, I apologize, but I'm recording this for posterity, so therefore I'm going to kind of start from the start, and I'll try to make that quick and concise. Okay, so one of the reasons why I have this channel is I want to help other people. I want to help people who are interested in IT get into IT, whether that's through certifications or just giving them some suggestion, things like that. That's what these live streams are for. That's why I always keep my chat open for questions. I'm always open for questions. Anyway, so that's that. So tonight, part of the thing I get asked the most is like, how did I get where I am? Not that I'm like on some top tier in IT, but you know, it's been a journey. So and I've had a lot of roadblocks. I mean, I've been accused of getting in IT and just being lucky, but I had a lot of roadblocks to get past. The first, I guess I'm going to retell the story a little bit different so that you don't have to deal with all the precursor. But when I was a child, I had childhood epilepsy. If you do not know what epilepsy is a seizure disorder. It causes your body. My version, there's many different types of epilepsy, but my my epilepsy I had would was caused by a immature pituitary gland, if I could say the word correctly. Basically, my brain wasn't getting enough oxygen because my gland that controlled oxygen to my brain was immature. When I was about 9 years old, I started taking medication for epilepsy, and the medication I was on was called Tegretol. It is in the grand scheme of things, it is basically the at the time was the next to strongest medication you could take for epilepsy. So there was Tegretol, and then there was phenobarbital. I remember reading the stuff on the side effects on Tegretol, and basically the first side effect that I remember reading, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but literally the first side effect was possible death. So I was always afraid that I would overdose on that. But one of the tenets of Tegretol is it's very strong and it slows you down. For me, an active kid, it slowed me down big time, to the point where I gained a whole bunch of weight. I had issues concentrating. I already had dyslexia, and this Tegretol and the childhood epilepsy didn't help with this. It got worse, right? So, in elementary school, this is kind of where I was when the stream died. But in elementary school, teachers didn't quite know. At the time I was in elementary school, teachers didn't quite know what epilepsy was. My parents thought that they were doing a benefit to me by having the Epilepsy Society come in to the school and basically teach everyone in my grade level. They had these special conferences with each class and kind of informed them of what epilepsy was. And so you could only imagine a kid, in second and third grade. Kids are ruthless. They hear that you have epilepsy, and they think, first of all, they think it's contagious. They, make cooties jokes about it, things like that. But the thing that I can get past, the thing I couldn't get past, was that I had a few teachers that, one in particular, because elementary school you usually have one teacher unless you go into the next grade, right? That she thought that if she observed me and thought I was going to have a seizure, so that I wouldn't disturb the class, she would stick me out into the hallway by myself at a desk in the hallway, so that if I had a seizure, I wouldn't be disturbing the rest of the class. First of all, that's incredibly dangerous. Second of all, I was lucky to never have a seizure during the day in front of other people. Most of the time, my seizures happened at night when I was either getting ready to go to bed or mid-sleep, or if I was hanging out with family in the living room. I would sometimes seize or have a seizure during that time. So anyway, what epilepsy did to me was it slowed me down so much that I didn't actually learn how to read until I was in about 6th grade. I was 6th grade going into junior high. So I missed, because of the strongness of the drugs, of Tegretol, I basically missed everything from 1st grade. Like, I learned, your ABCs and your basic words in kindergarten and 1st grade, but from basically 2nd grade to 6th grade, I got nothing out of school. Like, absolutely nothing. I had low test scores. I had a very below average reading level, like non-existent. I had, a whole bunch of problems because of this medication. So, going into junior high, because, school systems in California, at least when I was a student, they would just push you along. It didn't matter if you weren't ready or not. They push you along to the next grade, which me personally, I think that's, a disservice not only to me but to others in that situation. So I ended up going to middle school or junior high, which was 7th and 8th grade. In 7th grade, I was about halfway through the school year. I was still on Tegretol. So, but I was weaning myself off. I had been having less epileptic seizures. I had consulted with my doctor because I wasn't happy taking the medication. And he advised me to wean off of the medication. So luckily, Christmas of 1994, I was able to take my last pill. And very shortly after that, I had what I've known, because I haven't experienced anything else since, was what the doctor said might happen, is I had my last epileptic seizure. And that was it. I haven't had a seizure since 1994. I haven't been on drugs for epilepsy since 1994, and very happy. So what the medication did for me as a kid at 9 years old, and like taking me down to like a snail's pace, 8, 9 years old, taking me down to a snail's pace where I wasn't learning anything. I couldn't participate. Obviously, the opposite effect happened when I got off the drugs. So, in junior high, especially the end of my first year in junior high and then into my second year, I skyrocketed, like the exact opposite of what I had been dealing with previously. So I learned how to read very quickly. In 1 year, I went from a basically kindergarten, first grade reading level to they said on the cusp of college reading level in 1 year. But even though I did that and I could comprehend and I could read, my spelling and grammar, of course, that takes longer to figure out. So that suffered. So I was lucky. I was in a resource class, or special ed, as most people like to call it. I guess a bit of the short bus. And I had a teacher in 7th grade that saw that I really liked messing around on the Apple II computer that he had in his classroom. He had a Apple II computer, and for some reason he had Leisure Suit Larry, which was a game on the Apple computer. It was like an animated game, all in ASCII code, and I don't know if you have any history with that game or if you've heard about that game, but basically it's a pretty PG game unless you answer a series of questions. I think it's like 20 questions, and they were like age-appropriate questions. And if you did that, the game would get a little bit more risque. And to the teacher's credit, if he noticed that you got past those questions, he would certainly turn off the computer pretty quickly. I don't know why he didn't just take the game out of circulation, but the game was there. I liked working on the computer, and that was basically my first experience with computers. And I was just always interested in them, so I really started working on them, and he noticed it. And so he went to my father, and the first thing he told my father is, "You need to get your son a computer." Well, my dad was in construction, so he was a brick mason, a very good brick mason. And but we lived in the San Joaquin Valley in California, and whenever it would rain, he couldn't work because the mud would not go off. Whenever it was hot outside, he couldn't work because the mud would go off too quickly, so he couldn't lay brick. And if you've ever been in the San Joaquin Valley of California, basically also known as the breadbasket, or the area of agriculture, in Bakersfield and the San Joaquin Valley, Kern County, it can easily get to 105 to 110 degrees during the summer. So if you're a brick mason, mud doesn't stay good for long. So we were not very rich, and we were barely getting by most of the time. Matter of fact, when I was in junior high, not only was I going to junior high, but I was working for a gas station. I was about 14 years old, and I had gotten a job working at a gas station where they told me at age 13 or 14 that I was 16 years old, so I could actually work. And then, and that's a whole nother story, but basically, age was a lie at that job. But I worked at a gas station during that time. Anyway, so back to the teacher. The teacher told my dad, hey, he's got a real affinity for computers. You need to get him a computer. And also, I'm trying to bring this program into the school that works with computers, and it's specially designed for kids that have trouble learning, or with dyslexia, or have some kind of learning disability. And I would really like to get your son into that program because it's all on computer, and I think he would really excel. My dad agreed, and I was in that program. What was supposed to be a year program, like the whole course was supposed to take a year, I completed it in like 2 months. And I was actually going around to the class and helping other students the rest of the year. Basically, I graduated out of that class. I didn't end up staying the whole year. I ended up going into other classes outside of that. So I excelled and did very well. Around this time, towards the end of my my second year in junior high, my father ended up getting that Packard Bell computer. And he got it at Walmart, and he had to have it on layaway. It wasn't just like he went in and threw down money. I think at the time, the computer was a 486 DX. It had a total of, if I remember correctly, 8 megabytes of RAM, and the hard drive was 350 megabytes of storage, and it had this new fandangled disk technology on it that no one had heard of, or not they heard of it, but it was new to everyone, and that was a CD-ROM on it, which the disk held, the actual CD-ROM disk, which was 650 megabytes, held more storage than the hard drive that I had on the computer, which, go figure. But something I mentioned in the last stream earlier tonight, before I had technical difficulties, was I always had an affinity for taking things apart and figuring them out. When I was 5 years old, my dad bought a train set that I never got to set up with him, and I kept on asking parents, to be able to set up the computer, or set up the train set, and I got tired of, eventually, like around 5.5 or 6 years old, I got tired of waiting for them, so I went into the closet myself, got the train set it up fully, surprised my parents. That wasn't the only time. There was, like, I would take clock radios apart, and I would figure out how they worked. My dad had a 6-disc CD player for the house, and if anyone remembers that time or is from that time in the in the late 90s, or mid 90s to late 90s. This was early 90s. This is like 92, 93. CD disc players for your house were not cheap. Like the 6-disc CD player that my dad had was honestly, I think, around $1,000 when he picked it up. But he came home one day, and I had taken apart this disc player because I was interested in how it worked. And to my dad's credit, he didn't freak out. He could have easily freaked out, but instead of freaking out, he actually said to me, "When you put it back together, it better work." Lucky for me, when I put it back together, it worked. So this was the same thing with this Packard Bell computer. My dad got it for me from Walmart. He brought it home, and just like any kid, I was like 12 or 13 at the time, maybe 14. And just like any kid at that age, you don't always clean your room, right? Your room's a mess. The house is a mess. You probably don't do your chores. I was just like any other kid. I didn't do my chores all the time, and my room was a mess. So he brought the computer home from Walmart. He put it in the middle of the living room, and he said, "You are not allowed to open this computer. You are not allowed to do anything with this computer until you clean your room. You need to do your chores, and then you can set this up and stuff like that." But that computer was to sit there until I got my chores done. Well, as I stated earlier, my dad was a brick mason, and I got really used to his schedule. So I knew that when he went to work, he'd be there a while. I got home from school. I knew he wasn't going to be home for a while, and I unpacked the computer from the box, totally took everything out of the box. I had taken the tape back, so someone wouldn't notice it. And I proceeded, without turning on the computer to first see it boot up or anything, I proceeded to take that computer completely apart. At this time, I had no clue what computers did. I mean, I knew how to use a computer because I had used the Apple II at school. I had used the IBM OS2 at school for that program that I completed in 2 months, but I had never been into the guts of a computer. I didn't know what I could touch, what I couldn't touch. All I knew is I wanted to take it apart and figure out how it worked. I took that thing completely apart. And then once I took it apart and saw what every part was and kind of read, what it was on the back of the card or whatever, I put it all back together. I buttoned up the case. I plugged it into the monitor, made sure it worked, and then I proceeded to repack that computer into the box and tape it up. And my dad never knew that I did that until about 4 or 5 years later, when I admitted to it and told him that I had done it. With that computer, going from my second year in junior high into freshman year of high school, I started figuring out how the computer worked. So I started messing with the computer. I would find books and read the books. I would back when I got that computer, computers would come with books that thick, like a user's manual on how to use the computer. And you could go to the like Barnes and Noble or Borders or like a mom and pop store and pick up like a book that had like MS-DOS or something like that on it. And I would learn that way on how to mess with this stuff. And just picking it up as I went, like whatever information I could find. Now, back when I had this computer, internet was just barely getting going, or it was non-existent, right? We had dial-up modems. I had a modem in that computer, and if you were lucky and you got an AOL disk with like 200 hours on it, sometimes more hours, you get the AOL disk with a special code. You put it in, you dial up to AOL, and get whatever connection you could get. My dad would never want to spend money on the internet connection, so therefore, we never did. I kept on getting these AOL disks and using the trial period so I would have internet. Well, one day I was going around. I was mowing lawns. So at this time, I'm mowing lawns. I'm at 14 years old now, 14, 15 years old. I'm mowing lawns and working for the same gas station. Now, before the gas station, I told you they told me at like 13 years old that I was 16 so I could work. And they were paying me under the table as a young kid. And then at 14 and a half, they started telling me that I was 18 so I could sell cigarettes to adults. And then so I did that, and I also worked lawns. I cut lawns. I had a couple friends that worked for me, and we went around the neighborhood and we cut lawns. And during one of these days, I was cutting lawns on a Sunday. Someone had a yard sale, and they had some computer stuff out. And I was going through their yard sale, and I found this program, and I didn't know what it was, but it looked interesting. It was called, I remember the box. It had a black cat on it, and across the top it said Wildcat BBS. I'm like, what the heck is Wildcat BBS? And so I read the box, and on it said, connect with other people, host your own service, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I picked it up. I picked it up for, I think, like $2. And as soon as I was done with mowing lawns, I went home. I took it home, and I installed it in my computer, and I started finding out this world of BBSs. Now, granted, this is in 93 or 94, and so BBSs have been around for a while. If you've never heard of a BBS is called a bulletin board service. It is pseudo internet before internet. So people used to stand up BBSs or bulletin board services on either servers that they put together or computers. Like I had that Packard Bell computer hooked up, and I had figured out how to get a 4-port network, a 4-port dial-up modem on it. I had, with my lawn mowing money and the work that I did at the gas station, I had purchased 4 phone lines and had it connected. I had learned how to use the BBS. I was posting stuff on it. I was creating ASCII graphics. I was big into the Boy Scouts at the time. I was like a senior patrol leader in my troop, and so I had made a BBS that had all the information for the troop, and I gave everyone the phone numbers so that, if they wanted to connect and get information for like a merit badge, or they wanted to get requirements for a merit badge, or they wanted to get some kind of form or something like that, they could connect to my BBS and get this information. And I also had another friend who's going to actually join me here on this stream in about 2 to 3 weeks. His name's Matt Mitchell. Very cool guy. When we were younger, he used to be my test subject, I guess you could say. When I was building my BBS, he knew enough about computers that he could go home and he would connect to my BBS, and I'd have him test things, and he'd tell me whether it worked or didn't work, or if I needed to change something. And we'll talk more about that when he's here. But so I got into this phase of doing BBS systems, and I started tinkering with, like, family started asking me to work on computers, stuff like that. And I really didn't know what I was doing with hardware, but I knew enough to be a little bit dangerous. So I go from middle school, junior high. I go into high school. My freshman year of high school, I just did these BBSs. I was working 3 jobs and stuff like that. At the end of my freshman year, I got really tired of being in Bakersfield. That's where I was, in Kern County, and decided to move up north. So I went up north and I moved with my mother, who was living in the El Dorado Hills area. And I went to high school there. And I went there and they put me in resource classes because I had history with issues with learning disability and been working through them. My reading level at this point was in the high college level, but my reading and my writing and grammar was still being brought up. So I was in resource classes, but I ended up going into a finance class in my sophomore year in high school up in El Dorado Hills, and I ran into a friend named Sean, and this guy found out very quickly that I was interested in computers. So Sean got me involved with the library, being a library tech aide. And at this particular high school I went to, they relied on the students in the school, a certain set of approved students in the school, to repair computers, both the computers in the lab that they had in the library, like a media lab, and also the computers for the teachers. So they had teacher computers out there. They had some old Apple books, Apple Power books that were black and white, what they called TFT screens or monochrome screens. And then we had some that were color, but they were like old panels. And we would work on like Macintosh computers, the box computers where it was all one unit and stuff like that. And this was all back as a sophomore in high school. And this was in, I want to say 94, 95. So internet's starting to get going. Matter of fact, that year I signed up for Hotmail because that was the big thing. That was the first service that offered free email. And it was before Microsoft owned them and before they killed it and changed the name and all that stuff. Anyway, so I learned some basic technical stuff with like learning how to fix computers, like how to replace hard drives, how to replace floppy drives, how to change out a motherboard, how to bastardize a computer together. You got, 4 or 5 computers that don't work. Let's get the parts from these different 4 or 5 computers, put them into one computer and make it work. So you get parts from here, all that stuff, and get it together and just get it to work. Because obviously computers were very expensive and schools, notoriously do not have a lot of money. And I mean, enough that this particular school is using students to fix all the computers, right? So I got some experience there. A lot of family drama went on that during that time. And so I ended up at the end of my sophomore year deciding to move back to Kern County in Bakersfield, California, which my dad was very happy to have me back. So was my previous employer at the gas station. They took me right back in, and I started working there again. And I started back at the same high school I had been at in my junior year. My junior year, about the second week of it was the first or second week. I had gone into one of the classes I had was I think it was literature or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but it wasn't like U.S. history. It was something to do with like literature or something like that. Anyway, in that class, I sat down next to this guy. I didn't really notice him off bat, maybe because I was gone for a year and I just lost it. But the person I was sitting to ended up to be Matt Mitchell. And we were, again, fast friends. And he was constantly getting in trouble with the teacher. And I was constantly getting in trouble because I was talking to him and vice versa and all that stuff. Anyway, during one of these classes, he was asking me about my BBS because he had remembered when I was doing the BBS and stuff like that. And I told him, where I went for my sophomore year. And, that I lived up north for a period of time and that I helped out in the library fixing computers and stuff like that. And he goes, "Oh, you fix computers?" And I said, "Yeah." And I honestly, to God, thought I was God's gift to computers at the time. That's everyone in IT at one point or another probably has that thought, and they learn very quickly that that's not a good thought to have because no one likes it in IT, obviously, and customers don't like that if you think that you're God's gift. Anyway, so Matt Mitchell informs me of this technician that works for the high school and is always looking for TAs. So I'm like, oh, cool. So he gets me a meeting with the gentleman. His name is Phil. And I won't say his last name until I get permission to do so, but his name is Phil. And he and I talk. He meets me. He asks me what I know about computers. And of course, I'm coming off like I'm God's gift to everything. I'm God's gift to computers. There's no one that can fix a computer better than me. No one's ever seen a technician like myself, right? And so I'm just going off, and he graciously and calmly signs my permission slip and agrees to have me as a TA, even though he probably figured that I was full of crap half the time. So I get on his team as a TA, and the first week I'm in his class, or the first week I'm in his office, because he only had like 2 or 3 TAs. Matt Mitchell was one. There's a few others, which if I ever get in contact with them and get their permission to use their name, I'll do that. But Matt Mitchell was one, and I was in there. And anyway, I was in the office with Phil, and he was telling me about what our responsibilities were and what he expects out of us, and starting to teach me some things. And he started talking about networks, and I'm like, networks? And being that I was God's gift to computers, there's no way I would admit to him that I didn't know about networks, right? But he starts talking about TCP/IP. He starts talking about switches. He starts talking about hubs. The different speeds and gateways and network masks and stuff like that, and basically flexing his muscle of the amount of knowledge that he has. And I very quickly admitted to him that I didn't know anything about networks, because it was literally getting outside of the realm that I knew. I was put in my place. I was very quickly put in my place, and so realized that there was much more that I needed to learn. What's great about Phil is he didn't hold it against you, and he turned around and became the greatest mentor I ever had. He is the reason why I graduated high school, because since I had a learning disability, they wouldn't let me out of resource classes, and I got very bored. I didn't do any assignments. I didn't do it. If I was in a classroom, everyone around me did well because I was answering all the questions and I was helping everyone out. But the work myself, I didn't do because it's just boring. It was below me. And I don't mean that in some mean way. I just honestly, that's what it was. Is I wasn't allowed into advanced classes because they they allowed the short disability I had in learning to kind of overshadow any possibility of getting anywhere else. So it was a very boring existence. Um, you know, anyway, so Phil got me interested, found out that I was very interested in technology, very interested in it possibly being a career. My first selection actually in being a career, like if you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up, my first selection, the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to be a pilot. Well, obviously, with the lazy eye, which I don't have now because I had it surgically corrected about a month ago, with the lazy eye, a bum foot, and epilepsy, there's no way in hell I was going to be a pilot. I mean, really, would you want me as your pilot? And like, it would have been cool, but obviously that was not in the cards for me. So my next love was technology, and I volunteered as a TA for the rest of my high school career. I volunteered in junior high, or not junior high, sorry. I volunteered in junior year and senior year. And then when my senior year, I didn't actually graduate. I didn't have enough credits, so I ended up volunteering for the summer to help out around the campus and doing some summer school classes. And even then, I still had like a quarter extra to do, so I was like a fifth year senior. But I had volunteered all summer to help out the school. I helped out Phil. I helped out all the teachers. I really busted my butt. I gained so much respect that year that the principal at the beginning of the year pulled me into his office and said, "Look, you're missing your graduation by this many credits. They're like 5 credits. That's basically an elective class. You've completed all your required classes, but you got this or that credit left." He goes, "We're going to work it out. You've completed your credits. We're going to update your record so that you graduated on time." So if you look at my diploma, if you look at my certificate and everything, it shows that I graduated on time with the rest of my class. I didn't graduate late. I graduated when I was supposed to. And the reason why I got that luck, and it was pure luck, was thanks to Phil giving me the opportunity, and also just hard work, lots and lots of hard work, volunteering for the school. So thankfully to Phil being my mentor, thankfully to Matt Mitchell turning me to Phil, I was able right out of high school to get a job working for a company that I don't think they really exist anymore, but they did at the time. New Horizons Computer Learning Center. I started working for them right out of high school as a facilities technician. My responsibility as a facilities technician was to set up labs for people going through education classes with them. They were a for-profit computer training company. And so my job was, obviously computers are still expensive and they're for-profit, obviously, so that, they typically had multiple classes, but they didn't have like each class wasn't like filled to the rim with students. So what they would typically do is they had different schedules, and I would have to move computers from one location to the next. So, during the day they would teach Microsoft Excel, and this was this is in 97, 98. So they were teaching, I worked for that company in 1999. So they were using Excel 97 to teach. They were, I think Excel XP came out during that time. Office XP came out at that time, along with Windows XP. It came out at that time. And so they were using that. So they would have one class in the morning that you would teach Excel, and then in the afternoon they would have another class that would teach Word, and maybe they needed computers from the Excel class to be in the Word class so that they have enough computers. So that was my job. During that time, we had the computer motherboards had these big sockets on them. They were about that big around, called AT sockets, and that's how the keyboard connected to the computer. We didn't have wireless computers, or not wireless computers. We didn't have wireless keyboards or wireless mouse. Everything was connected with a cable, and so we had a whole bunch of these motherboards that had these big connectors, the AT connectors for the keyboard, and they had a couple of these lunchbox things that they would take to like training classes off-site and stuff like that. And these AT connectors were always breaking because they would stuff in the keyboard connector and it would loosen the solder and stuff like that. And so I got known for being able to fix those pretty well. So that was my first soldering experience, and that was really the first job I had where I was working in IT. So right out of high school. And just to tell you how IT changes over time, when I got out of high school and I went into that job, they didn't want degrees. They didn't care if you had a degree. They didn't care if you had a certification. They just wanted to know that you were able to work and that you were able to figure things out. You knew computers somewhat. So during that year, I had actually gotten my first Microsoft certifications. I got certification in Microsoft Server. I got a certification in Microsoft Word, not Word, sorry. Well, I did get that too. I got certification in Microsoft Workstation, Workstation 2000, and Server 2000 is what I certified on. And that got me my MSP, or Microsoft Certified Professional. I also got my first Comptia certification. My first Comptia certification was Comptia A+ certification, and I got that certification back when they no longer offer it this way, but I got that certification as a lifetime certification. So technically, I have A+ certification as a lifetime certified tech because I got it during that time. However, I still get retested. I've personally taken the A+ certification exam 5 different times. I've certified in it 5 different times. The first time was a lifetime, and then I've done 4 other certifications in it. Anyway, those were my first 3 certifications I got. I worked there for about a year, and then I decided that the first time going up north wasn't enough, and decided to move up north again. So I moved up north, and I started working for the school system up there. I worked for the Rescue Union School District, and I also worked at Office Max as a customer service manager, where I had the West Coast sales record for 6 months in a row, and selling Max Assurance at the time. So Office Max unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but I got that job. Crazy story. I walked in there with I had dirt head to toe. I had been helping dig ditches that day with my mom's then boyfriend, and decided to take off with my mom to. She had an errand to run, and while she was in another store, I decided to walk into Office Max, and I ended up talking to the customer service person at the front desk and said, "Hey, are you guys looking for anyone?" And sure enough, they were, and I walked out with a job. Is interesting, and it turned out that I ended up working for Office Max for 2.5 years, where I went from selling computers to customer service, and then at the same time I worked for the Rescue Union School District as a computer technician for one of their elementary schools. I helped build their lab. I helped reclaim a bunch of computers that they had stuck in a storage room and put back into use. And I eventually started getting called up to the district level to help with computer IT issues at the district level with the different schools in the Rescue Union School District Elementary, well, not elementary, but Rescue Union School District, helping out there. So I did that about 2 years. Yeah, about 2 years I did that. And then, it was about 2 years I did that. And then I got a call from my mentor at South High in Kern County. And Phil called me and said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to fill this position. Are you interested?" I said yes. I went and interviewed for it and ended up working for the same high school I graduated from. I actually worked for that high school multiple years, about 5 or 6 years. And then I went from there and went into the private sector, where I got my first experience with basically dishonest people. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but basically I went from there. I worked at that company for about a year and a half, and then decided to go about it on my own. My dad had passed away. We're now in 2005, 2006. My dad passed away. I got some inheritance. And when I got the inheritance, I knew what my dad wanted me to do with it, so I started a company. I started a company called Dynamic Technology Solutions. And I ran that company from 2006 until about 2009. I grew very fast. I was renting a house at the time. I ran the business out of my house for the first 3 to 5 months. I started it with a good friend of mine, and he was renting a room from me from the house that I was renting, and we started the company inside the house, and then very quickly we moved to office space, and then within a year and a half, 2 years, I had 5 employees. My friend ended up leaving the company, but I had 5 employees and was on track to making really good money in 2008. And then if anyone knows history, there was a downturn in the market in 2008. In particular, it was a downturn in real estate and a downturn in oil. And the housing market crashed. The problem was I didn't diversify enough. I got really good at specializing in a piece of software that realtors used called Checkpoint. And it was called CalX Checkpoint. And what it was a piece of software that when a realtor, let's say you're interested in buying a house, the realtor would they would put your information in a Checkpoint, and as they showed you houses, when you decided on a house, they would put all that information in. They would get your financial information. They would get all that other stuff, and this software kept track of it, and then they could export it, and it would go to a lender or it go to a title company, and is basically a software that kind of tracked all that, and it followed you along your process of buying a house. Fortunate for me, during 2006, 2007, and in 2008, there wasn't a lot of people that knew how to use this software. So this is my first experience of finding a niche and going after it. And I did very well because I was one of the only people in the Kern County area that knew how to use this software and how to network it. So I got a lot of business networking people's computers, especially in real estate, and getting this software to work for them and getting it on multiple computers and stuff like that. And the real estate community, everyone kind of knows everyone, so I would get recommended to other people. And what I suggest, and I would suggest this today, if you find a niche in something, go with that niche, because if you know other skills, I used that niche of using that software to get into a company. I would fix their issue with that software, and they would go, well, is there anything else you can do? And I'm like, yeah, I can fix your computers. I can do this. So I ended up doing all their computer work on top of the niche software support that I was able to do. So that worked out very nicely for me. And I also worked in the oil industry. I had a company that I inherited from the previous company I worked for. They chose to follow me when I went out on my own. I did not steal them. They searched me out. I did not give them my phone number. When they found me, they used me for their technician, and of course my employees that I had worked with them too. So we worked with them for a while. Well, 2008 came along. It hurt both industries. I was able to stay alive for a little bit during 2008 because I had a contract with Comptia, which no longer exists, at least not in the form that it did back then. I had a contract with Comptia to build a database for processes that Dryer's Ice Cream, which was located in Kern County, their R&D department. They would run things through their R&D department. They would put their readouts and stuff into this database that I built for them. So I was contracted through Comptia for that, and that was my first thing. Try to be, number one, if you're going to contract with people, make sure you have a solid contract, and not only that, make sure that you have decent payment terms. My problem is when I was doing work for Dryer's Ice Cream, they paid Comptia, and Comptia was supposed to pay me. Unfortunately, mid-project, Comptia went bankrupt. So Dryer's Ice Cream paid Comptia. Comptia got their money, but they never paid me. I had my first experience with going through bankruptcy court, not because I was going bankrupt, but someone else was. And for a contract that I had, let's say, this is not the actual figure, but it was close, a $40,000 contract. I got, in the end, I was lucky to get $1,500 to $2,000 out of it. So it was a bad experience, and it wasn't. I'm not blaming Dryers. It wasn't their fault. It was Comptia. So in 2008, I lost my business. I ended up doing something that I would recommend that you never do, and I ended up getting in trouble with the government. I got in trouble with the government because when I was closing up my business, this is like beginning of 2009, when I was closing up my business, I had a choice to make. I could either pay my last employee his last paycheck, or I could pay the government. I chose to pay the employee, and that was the money I had. If you've ever been in trouble with the government, if you've ever not paid the government taxes or sales tax or anything like that, the interest on non-payment compounds daily. It climbs faster than you know, and the government damn near has all the power. I was in a catch-22. I chose to pay my employee. You know, it's one of those decisions you had to make. Now, one of the things I get asked all the time is, like, would I ever go back into business for myself? And the answer is pretty much no. At least I won't go back into business for myself where I have employees. If you live on your own, or you have a family, or you have kids, you know that it is stressful making sure that you bring enough money home to keep a roof over your head and to feed the ones that you love. Now take that stress and multiply it times however many employees you have. Because if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 employees like I did, it's very stressful. Now, when the times are good, for example, when I started my business in 2006, and as I grew through 2008, business was good, and I could pay my employees. When overnight everyone stopped paying their bills because there was a downturn in the market, they weren't paying me. I couldn't pay my employees. I took my own money to keep my employees employed. I took out a loan to keep my employees employed. And even doing that, I had to let people go. And they understood. I mean, I'm still friends with most of them. And if they saw me in person, they would not be chasing me with a sickle or a hammer or something like that, trying to end me. I've contact with them many times. I check up on one of the previous employees quite a bit, and he's always very happy that he worked for me, and they understand. So I did well. I did well by my people. So I find that as a feather in my cap. I took care of people. I was a good manager of people. I know I'm a great manager because I've experienced it, and the people that worked for me, I have their respect, and I appreciate that. So anyway, going from that, I closed the door to my business. I went to another company that was an MSP, or managed service provider, which is the company kind of that I ran. And I took my client list with me, and made my clients their clients. And I worked for that company for about 9 months. And I worked for that company for 9 months because, if anyone remembers, from 2008 to about 2011, the market was still pretty bad. So the company I worked for them for 9 months. Funny enough, they had the same initials as my company had. So I had Dynamic Technology Solutions. They had, I'm not going to say their name. If you look at my resume, you'll see them. But they were D and then Technology Solutions. So they, it was yeah, it was pretty close to that anyway. Anyway, so I worked for them for 9 months, and then I was let go because I was the last in the door, and so I was the first out of the door when they had to downsize. They just didn't have enough work to keep me, and they were very nice about it, very cool about it. And then I went from there to I started teaching at Kaplan College. Well, no, before that, sorry, I went to work for another MSP, which soured me on mom and pop shops. Sometimes, not all mom and pop shops, but certain mom and pop shops. Uh, anyway, I worked for that other place for about a year, and then at the end of that employment, this is in I was at this is now in 2010, 2011. I started working for Kaplan College. And if you watched my interview that I had with Antonio Moore, which was this last Sunday, which was an awesome interview and awesome conversation with Antonio. I worked with Antonio at Kaplan College. We tried starting a business. I went from Kaplan College, which when me and Antonio were teaching at Kaplan College, they had two programs. They had a CST program, which was a computer service technician program, and then they had a CNT program, which was a computer networking technology program, or computer network technician program, which is which Antonio taught. We taught there, both of us taught there for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And then Kaplan College decided to end the program. Even though it was popular, they decided to teach out the program. So when they decided to teach out the program, the dean from that school moved to a new school that was being built in the area, and that was another for-profit college called UEI. And so I moved to that college as well. As the program got taught out, I went to the other college and started teaching business. Now, during this period of time, and this is kind of where it gets interesting, unfortunately, I had family issues. Not that I was married and got divorced or anything like that, but I had issues with family having issues, and I was supporting that family. And unfortunately, when I left the job, the last like the mom and pop shop job that I left, I knew I could no longer afford my apartment. And since I was supporting a family, being my mother and my sister and my brother, unbeknownst to me, I was working 3 jobs at the time, so I hardly ever was home. But I basically told family that I had to let go of the apartment, and we all had to kind of go our separate ways. Unfortunately, unbeknownst again to me, the family, when I turned into the key to the management of the property, unfortunately, my family, who I had moved out, decided to move back in. And unfortunately, after a while, they got evicted. And since I was the last person on record for that location, and so due to some shady court proceedings, I ended up stuck with the bill of an eviction, which added to the debt that I had from the failed business. The debt that I had quite a bit of debt from the failed business, and I had additional debt from the eviction. So I was quite a bit in debt, and I ended up going homeless. I could not find a place to live. I was basically living out of my truck, and luckily to me, I had made some relationships as far as in business when I ran my own company from that 2006 time to 2009. I had built some relationships. So this is in 2010, 2011. I became homeless, and And well, no, sorry, it's more like 2011, 2012. I became homeless, and due to the relationships I had in business, I was able to work out a situation with a family that owned a building in Bakersfield, and they kind of overlooked the fact that the office that they let me have free of charge, because I was helping them with different things in that building, setting up networks and setting up internet connections, and doing their company's computer work pretty much for free. Because I was doing all that, they overlooked the fact that I was living in the basement of the building. So I lived under a desk for about 2.5 years, and I would work basically Monday through Friday. I was working for a CPA firm at the time, so I was working 3 jobs, pretty much from the age of 13 until I was 34. I worked 3 jobs, like consistently. So during this time, I worked for a CPA firm, is their in-house tech slash helping people, helping their customers. And I taught for Kaplan College and UEI during the same time. So I was teaching for 2 schools. So I would, in the morning, I would go from like 8 o'clock in the morning until 12, and I would teach a class. And then from 12 to 4, I would work for the CPA firm. And then from 5 to 10 o'clock at night, I worked for the other private college. So I was literally working nonstop. So, and I held these 3 jobs during the whole time I was homeless. So I was homeless for 2.5 years. I slept under a desk, and all the money I made for the 3 jobs I had, I paid off all debt that I had from the business, personal debt, and the debt of the eviction. So I was paying all that off. I had friends during the time that had like $20,000 of debt, and they were claiming bankruptcy. I've never claimed bankruptcy, and I honored the debts that I had, and it's just part of the Boy Scout thing in me. I guess the trustworthiness and loyalty and just honoring your debts. And so I took care of all my debts. And so I was homeless for 2.5 years. I worked during the whole time. Luckily, the building I was in had a shower in the basement because they had a gym in the basement, so I was able to use that. And I would work Monday through Friday, mostly because the companies I worked for did not have anything that they did on Saturdays and Sundays. And so I would see people, work with people, work my butt off Monday through Friday. And then on Friday, after you get off of work, I would go down to the basement. I would stay in the basement pretty much from Friday afternoon until that following Monday, and literally speak to nobody, like no interaction with anyone, no nothing. I did a lot of studying on IT stuff, on networks and software, and messing with web pages and stuff like that. But it gets quite lonely, which is kind of what kind of scares me a little bit. Thank God for my wife, and what friends I have in scouting. Thank God for that, because with this COVID stuff, I totally like lose my mind. But I up until that point when I was homeless, I had a certain thought about people that either attempted suicide or successfully committed suicide. I was raised to think that people that committed suicide or attempted suicide were chickens and gave up too easily and all those things, right? But that my mind was kind of changed when I was faced with it. So, um, and this was something that changed my life. So, about, I want to say, about a year, almost 2 years into being homeless, I was in the basement on a weekend. It was a long weekend. I think it was like Martin Luther King Jr. weekend or something like that. It was a weekend where it was a extended weekend. I had been in the basement for, I think, at that point, 3 days. It was a 4-day weekend. Yeah. So I'd been in the basement for 3 days, hadn't spoken to anyone, had only left the basement to go to check on the building, basically act as security during the weekend when no one was in the building. And then I would go to like a fast food restaurant or something, or my stomping grounds was IHOP, and eat real quick, and then I'd be back in the basement all the time, not speaking to a solitary soul. One night I was sitting there working on the computer, watching YouTube or something like that, and I had these energy, like the 5-hour energy drink things, and I was stacking them up, one in on in, and I was just really depressed, and the thought of suicide crossed my mind, and it kind of hit me like, you know what? If I died down here, if I died in this basement, no one would know. Like, I wonder how long it would take people to realize that I was dead. Would they realize it? Would they care? And things like that. So those thoughts crossed my mind, and it scared me. To that point, I had been really concerned about the way other people thought of me. I was a people pleaser. I really, if someone said something about me, or if someone said that I did something wrong, or I had upset them somehow, or whatever, I really, I would take that hard. I would take that very much to heart, and it would affect me. And I would, it had a lot to do with what I considered my value system at the time. And, you know, someone saying something bad to me or disapproving of something I did would literally shut me down for days. And it would also get me into this depression spiral for quite a while. And it was almost debilitating. So I'm sitting down in this basement. I have these thoughts cross my mind, and I was lucky. I didn't attempt anything. I didn't, I'm not even what you could consider a failed suicide, because I guess the only way I failed is I didn't attempt anything at all. Basically, I got really pissed off. I just really got upset with myself. And a switch flipped in my head. And that sounds like a bit insane, but it really isn't. A switch flipped in my head, and I really quickly looked at my past. I really quickly looked at things that had happened to me in my past. And like I had a previous employer who talked to me as if I was going to be an owner of the business, and at the time I'd been able to invest some money into the company. I was told basically that I was going to be ownership in the company. I would have ownership in the company, so I invested money into the company, and somehow he turned that into a loan, and then proceeded to fail to pay me on the loan that he said I loaned him money, and basically ripped me off, which I should have known because he was not trustworthy to start with. So that's another lesson for anyone. If you ever get offered a business opportunity or a partnership opportunity, make sure you get that crap in writing. Do not let money pass hands until you have that lock solid in writing, and get a lawyer involved, period. Do not do anything on a gentleman's handshake or someone's word, because they may be trustworthy, and more power to them. And I see myself as trustworthy, but if I get into business dealing with someone, I'm going to get either a contract signed or something mediated by a lawyer, not only to protect myself, but also to protect the person that I'm getting into business with. I think it's a mutual thing, and it should be handled that way. So, anyway, yeah. So going back, I analyzed very quickly. It took me a whole hour and a half, 2 hours to change my mindset. Like, literally, when I say a switch was flipped, it was flipped. And I got into the attitude of screw everyone. And that sounds bad, but hear me out here. The screw everyone part of it was not that I don't care about people, because I obviously do. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this channel, is I care about people and I want to help people. But what I got into the mindset at that time, and I'm telling you, it changed my life. I got into the aspect of I don't care or put any weight into what other people think of me. I am going to be myself. I am going to be genuine. I am going to do my best, do everything to the best of my ability. I'm going to treat other people with respect. I'm going to expect to be treated with respect back. And if they choose not to, if they're negative, anything that would be a negative towards me, if that person is negative, I don't want anything to do with them. None. I have seriously cut out family. I have cut out friends. I have cut out anyone that had a negative aspect on my life. No, I'm not talking about like one or two instances where you just have a bad day, but if I share an idea with you, and instead of having constructive criticism back with me, and sharing ideas and stuff like that, and maybe I have a good idea, maybe I don't, there's a way to discuss that, right? There's a way to approach that. But if you sit there and the way you approach it is like, you're stupid, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, you're an idiot, you're worthless, whatever, screw that person. What do I care? I mean, honestly, what do you care? What do you care about what other people think about you? They have no bearing in your life. They have no weight. The only weight that person has in your life is the weight that you give them. So, as far as everything else, only thing that matters is what you think of yourself and how you perceive yourself. And know that you're good enough. Know that that you can do whatever you put your mind to, and know that you're worth it. Other than that, the only people that matter to me about what they think of me is my wife and my adopted kids. That's all that matters to me. Everyone else is ancillary. If they're positive people, I want them in my life, and I'm lucky to be surrounded by some positive people. But the moment you turn negative, the moment that nothing but negativity comes out of you, I have no room for you. And it sounds cruel, But what's that saying? Ain't nobody got time for that crap. You don't have time for negative people. Negative people need to be negative on their own and go somewhere else. So if you want, I know that I've offered multiple tidbits of advice during this. Um, Number one advice: cut out the negative people. Like, totally. If they're negative, you don't need them. Move on. And I go even as far as like family. If family is negative, if they're the people that are holding you back, you don't need them. Thank you for bringing me into this world, but I do not have time for you. If you're not on team Jacob, you're not on any team I care to be part of. And substitute my name with your name. If you're in contact with anyone and they're not on team whatever your name is, screw them. Move on. You don't need them. That's another piece of advice. I know I'm speaking to the ether, but it's trust me, it's advice that's literally changed my life for the better. So my wife is saying sorry because she hears me doing this conversation, but she is not negative. She's a good person, so I'm not worried about it. But so I was homeless for 2.5 years. I came across this epiphany. It's something that I've changed, and it's gone for the positive. So I eventually stopped working for Kaplan because they killed the education program that I was part of. And I started working for only UEI and for a CPA firm, which allowed me to do more hours at the CPA firm. Eventually, they asked me to stop teaching at UEI, and so I started working full-time for the CPA firm. During this time, I'm still homeless. This is still part of the 2.5 years that I was homeless. And I ran into another bit of luck. And the other part of advice is when there's an opportunity and you see your luck is kind of working for you, grab that luck, grab that opportunity. Because I kind of discussed this with Antonio Moore on Sunday during the interview, but I was working for that CPA firm when just on a chance we had called each other and said, hey, let's go to lunch. And it was at that lunch that I was talking to Antonio, and we were just shooting the crap between each other, telling each other what's going on and how things are going and stuff like that. And I mentioned to him that I was interested in floating my resume. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And he goes, get it to me right away, because the company he was working for was looking for someone. And I said, okay. So I gave him my resume, and next thing you know, 3 weeks later, I was telling the CPA firm that I was working for, hey guys, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for helping me out. Thank you for giving me a job, but I need to take this other opportunity. And that has led to where I am now. I have worked for that company basically because the company I now work for was the parent company of the company I got hired into. I got hired into the company that Antonio works for, and I worked there for 3.5 years. During that time, I made enough money finally, and I a couple of things lined up. So I got the job with the company Antonio was working for. I had just finished paying off all my debt. My last bit of debt was my student loan, and that got paid off. And shortly after getting the job, working where Antonio worked or works, I met the person who would eventually become my wife, and she saw me homeless. She came into my life at the end of my homelessness. I was living with my mom at the time. I had my mom and sister and brother had got me the eviction, and somehow they had gotten a place. So I said, well, I'm paying for the eviction that you guys got me, so I'm gonna borrow this room for a little bit. And I stayed there for a little bit, very short period of time. And then me and my wife got an apartment, and we ended up going from the apartment after a year and a half, 2 years, to a house. We bought our first house, and I bought my first brand new car. Like, I never, to that point, never owned a car that I had owned brand new. Every car I had prior to that had been used or hand me down. Literally hand me down cars. And so I bought my first new car, and was able to help my wife get a car, which she paid for. She did an awesome job with that. And we got the opportunity when the company that Antonio now works for, and the parent company that owned that company, and the company I now work for, decided to divest the other company. And Antonio stayed with the company he got me the job in, basically, or suggested me to get the job in, and I went with the company that was the parent company. So he stayed with the divested company, I went with the parent company, and I remain with that parent company. And I've been working for that company now. I'm over 7 years working with them. I've worked with them since 2014 to now. I'm continuing to work with them. So I've also changed career paths. So when I got hired with the company, I got hired on as a systems engineer, working with servers, working with helping work with the network teams, and also responsible for backup systems and stuff like that. Opportunity arose, and I was offered a security position when I was on the West Coast, and that eventually transferred into a security position in IT. I'm now I've worked at different levels of security. So I started off as like a jack of all trades, which I would not suggest to anyone. I started off as a jack of all trades, basically filling in where needed when a security team was basically had some people walking out the door to other opportunities. I filled their positions, so I got a lot of opportunity to work with, endpoint security. I got to work with proxy systems. I got to work with two-factor authentication systems, SIMs, ticketing systems, deploying a lot of things. So I got to do that. I then went on to working in vulnerability management, where I built a whole vulnerability management system that most of that system is still in use today, with other teams, which is cool. I enjoy that I had a piece in that. I've helped build other platforms, and now so I went from being like the jack of all trades to doing vulnerability management, from vulnerability management to incident response, and then now from incident response I'm I'm called a platform engineer, where I work with teams on making sure that platforms that they use for day-to-day business are configured correctly, that the external teams that we hire to do whatever are carrying it through, things like that. So I got a bunch on my plate now, but thankfully getting out of incident response into platform engineer gives me time to do channels like this. So started this YouTube channel back shortly, I would say a year or two after getting hired with the current company. I did some chapters. I got too critical on myself, and but I did some live streams and stuff like that when I was still on the West Coast, and always. Basically, I started this channel with the whole idea of like having a platform to share knowledge, to help other people, be that mentor for other people. That all these great mentors I had throughout my career had helped me, and so therefore to give back. Like, I got all this help, it's now my turn to help others, and so that's the idea of this channel. And honestly, when the company's divested and I went this way, Antonio went this way, unfortunately that also included a move from the West Coast. It's not unfortunate, I'm very happy to be over here, but it included a move from the West Coast to the East Coast. And being on the East Coast, I'm very happy with it, but along with that move came new adjustments, right? So the team I joined was growing. A lot of the tasks that we were doing were very time consuming. So this channel took a back seat. And through the last 3 years, I have focused very heavily on doing something. So I've built up a studio. I built the wall you see behind me. I have studio lights. I've definitely put out the money. My wife's going to kill me one of these days. I'm surprised she hasn't choked me to death and cut me open in the night. She would never do that. I'm just saying. I've definitely invested enough money into the equipment, right? So it's time to use that equipment. And so this last year, or this last New Year's, I made 2 resolutions. One I failed, one I'm determined to keep, and the one that I'm determined to keep is this channel. So we are now we're almost all the way through January. We got the remaining week. I've done 6 episodes of live streaming. I think this is maybe episode 7, I think. But I'm going to keep doing them. I am putting content together. It got kind of put on hold. I described this in the last live before I had the technical difficulty, but I had gotten an Elgato 4-channel encoder, and it came basically defective. So that's put a pause on some of the stuff I'm doing, but I got a new one ordered. I returned the other one. I got a new one ordered. It's supposed to be here tomorrow. And then my plan is to get this stuff recorded in short order, and I plan to have Comptia Fundamentals Plus. It might get pushed a little bit. My initial plan was to have it out this week or the first part of February, but it's looking like it's going to be the second week in February. But I am getting everything together. Once I get that card in, I got my sound situation taken care of. I got my camera situation taken care of. I got all the situations that were causing me not to be able to do good content taken care of. And I'm going to start pushing out that content. So you can expect in the next week and a half to 2 weeks that you will see Comptia Fundamentals Plus. And that's it. Other than that, I want to thank everyone, which currently is my wife, for joining. And then if you see this, if you've lived through the last I guess hour and a half of me talking, you've done an awesome job. Thank you for staying. If you like what I do and would like to help out, I do have a Patreon. It is in the description of this video. And just there's not many tiers. It's basically just contributions. And I do have a Amazon wish list. And also in the description of this video, if you want to help out with building the channel. Other than that, I'm not monetizing this channel, so you should never see ads on here unless I get a sponsorship. But thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. I hope everyone's healthy and safe. And until next time, I'll see you Sunday. Thank you.